Hello, Arun. Where are you located?
I'm in the US.
Sorry?
I'm in the US,
Where in US?
New Jersey.
Okay. Thank you.
Admin, please start recording. Admin, please start recording and live streaming. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Adityanji, and I'm the President of the Council for Strategic Affairs. We are meeting today, Saturday, March 9th at 10 a.m. Eastern Day Time for our usual roundtable discussion. I hope you can see my slide set. The discussion today is going to be on effectiveness of the MTCR, which stands for Missile Technology Control Regime. It is 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time today in US, 8:30 p.m. in India, and we have three distinguished panelists. First Lieutenant Arun Ayagari, Commodore R. Sheshadri Vasan, and Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor. Before we start the program, a little bit about Council for Strategic Affairs. The Council imparts education in the field of international relations. We foster discussion, dialogue, and debate on geopolitical issues. We encourage strategic studies in general to raise the level of awareness. The Council condemns terrorism in all its forms worldwide. The CSA aims to contribute towards world peace and prosperity, and we promote people-to-people contacts and track to diplomacy. A little bit about our activities. We have a monthly roundtable discussion, just like the one we are having today. Usually it is on second Saturday of each month. We have a guest lecture by a domain expert on fourth Saturday of each month, again at 10 a.m. Eastern Day Time. We have a one-on-one interview called Strategically Speaking with Dr. Adityanji with a domain expert once in a while. The Council organizes symposia, meetings, and conferences. We promote publications of articles on geopolitics and related subjects. We do have a summer internship program for college students, and we have a fellowship training program in strategic studies. And you will be seeing our first distinguished panelist, First Lieutenant Arun Ayagari. Arun is an editor and frequently writes on foreign policy and foreign affairs. He is a fellow at the American Indo-Pacific Forum, a think tank based in Washington, D.C. He is passionate about international relations. He is also an advanced pilot, a commercial pilot, a drone pilot, and as I stated, his title tells you that he honorably served as a first lieutenant in United States Air Force Auxiliary. He's an airplane ground instructor, airplane instrument instructor. He was awarded Chuck Yeager and Benjamin Davis Awards by the US Air Force Auxiliary, graduate of South Brunswick and East Brunswick Citizens Police Academy. He's an active community leader, certified substitute teacher in states of New Jersey, and teaches various advanced classes in US history, social studies, advanced math in middle and high school in New Jersey. He also teaches rocket science and aerospace engineering to cadets in the US Air Force, an editor, journalist, campaign consultant, campaign manager, chief political strategist. He's a multi-dimensional talent. And I'm very proud to say First Lieutenant Arun Ayagari has written on the CSA website and has also participated in CSA roundtable discussions before. And of course, you see Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor. Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor is a former ambassador and secretary at Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. He has a distinguished career working closely with leaders and policymakers in different continents of the world. He is an eminent diplomat. He is regularly invited for his commentary on global issues on Indian and international media. He is strategic advisor to Intellect Design Arena Limited, executive director of Smart Village Developmental Fund, director, ambassador of Circles, chairman, advisory council, diplomacyindia.com. He has made significant contributions as an academic also. He is visiting clinical professor for development, diplomacy, and leadership at the University of Maryland School of Public Policy. He is adjunct professor at the Management Development Institute in India. He is a visiting scholar at GW University at Elliott School of International Affairs and diplomatic associate at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. He's the coordinator of the Thought Leadership webinar series focusing on social development for the Wheels Global Foundation. He is a teacher and a mentor. Known worldwide, he has had his diplomatic postings worldwide. He's an alumnus of the IIT Delhi with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. Kindly unmute yourself, all the audience members. He is an author of many articles, books, and speaks French, Spanish, Hindi, Punjabi, Marathi, and English. We are grateful to him at the CSA because he's a member of the International Advisory Board of the Council for Strategic Affairs and has appeared on several occasions on our platform, both in roundtable discussions as well as for distinguished lecture series. And this is Commodore R. Sheshadri Vasan. Commodore Vasan is an alumnus of the Defense Staff College and Naval War College and an international visitor leadership program, USA. He has a distinguished career spanning over 34 years in the Indian Navy. His wide-ranging appointments since commissioning in 1969, both at sea and ashore, include command of ships, appointment in career-borne wing of INS Vikrant, command of long-range maritime reconnaissance. He has so many positions that will take me at least 15 minutes to read his bio. So I'm going to cut it short. Currently, he serves as director of Chennai Center for China Studies, a think tank which is doing credible work, and I'm very proud to say that I published on his think tank's website. Also, Commodore R. Sheshadri Vasan has served on our International Advisory Board, and he has been on our platform both in roundtable discussions as well as in distinguished lectures. So this is a little bit information about MTCR. These are the 35 countries that are members of the Missile Technology Control Regime across the globe. MTCR is an informal political understanding among these 35 countries to limit the proliferation of missiles and related technology. It was established in 1987 and focuses on controlling export of goods and technologies that could contribute to the delivery of weapons and mass destruction. The regime places particular focus on rockets and unmanned aerial vehicles capable of delivering a payload of at least 500 kilogram range and at least 300 kilometers or 190 miles. MTCR members have committed to licensing export of controlled items and to not assist ballistic missile programs in countries of proliferation concern. Again, a little bit about MTCR. Some housekeeping rules to our audience. Please mute yourself to avoid noise interference. Please change your cell phone to vibration mode. Please don't interrupt our esteemed panelists. Only those members of audience who identify themselves openly will be allowed to ask questions. All the questions are moderated through the chat room. Please ask very precise questions. Don't send lengthy comments. Finally, we are recording this session and it is also being simultaneously broadcast on our YouTube channel. So without further ado, I am going to invite First Lieutenant Arun Ayagari for his opening statement. Each opening statement will be for 7 minutes. Arun, please unmute yourself.
Hello, good morning. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, CSA. Thank you, Dr. Adityanji, for the time and the effort to conduct forums like these. Thank you very much, and thank you for the audience for being part of this forum or webinar. In your introduction, you mentioned about MTCR already. I'll not go into too much detail about what MTCR is. I'm pretty sure we'll talk about that. Like we all know, MTCR stands for Missile Technology Control Regime. I'll go back into history just a little bit, how MTCR was formed. As we all know, MTCR was formed in 1987 by the G7, by the then G7 industrialized states, which has now increased to 35 member states as its membership. However, the seeds of MTCR were born even before 1987. Not going back too much in time, but in 1982, when Ronald Reagan was the president of the United States, Mr. Reagan issued an executive order which was to do with nuclear-capable missile technology transfer policy. This became the U.S. policy to hinder proliferation of foreign missiles capable of developing nuclear weapons. This was the original arrangement. This then became socialized with the G7 states and became what we know today as MTCR. MTCR, like Dr. Adityanji mentioned, is an informal understanding. That's the key for this control regime. It's an informal understanding. It's not a treaty. I personally believe it's important to it's important to highlight the difference between a treaty and an export control regime, which MTCR is. A treaty is a formal and a legally binding agreement between two countries that sets out rules on how they will interact with each other. So the key word is legally binding agreement. That's what a treaty is. On the other hand, export control regimes like MTCR are informal arrangements between selective group of countries, often consisting of suppliers only. That's why it's export control. Some examples of treaties from the past are, the most popular one is the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. We also call it NPT. It was established it came to force, I should say, in 1970. It has 191 member states. There's another treaty, we call that CTBT, a Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, which came to force in 1996 with 177 member states. And there was INF, which is another treaty which a lot of people do not talk about, is Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which was ratified in 1988. That was between the United States and then Soviet Union. So these are some examples of treaties. Again, they're legally bound. Member states are legally bound. Export control regimes, like in this case, are multilateral export control regimes, which form an informal group of like-minded supplier controls, which seek to contribute to the non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. For example, MTCR comes under export control regime. Nuclear Supplier Group, which was formed in 1974, comes as part of, it is counted as part of export control regime. The Wassenaar Agreement, 1996. I'm pretty sure a lot of speakers will touch upon these. The Australia Group in 1985. This is an export control regime. So it's important to realize the difference between export control regimes and a treaty. So the MTCR, like we said, was formed in 1987, but ever since, initially the goal was to focus on the spread of missile technology for the use of weapons of mass destruction. But ever since, it expanded its scope. In 1992, I believe, for example, the regime was modified to include all potential systems capable of delivering chemical, biological and nuclear weapons. So it grew into much more than just missile non-proliferation. Now it includes missile, chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons, and which is why I think that that letter M is a misnomer now, taking into consideration current technological innovations and the spread of the expansion of the scope of MTCR. I think the MTCR member states and the board has to think about the alphabet M in the acronym. So that is about MTCR. It effectively, again, like I said, it sets international standards for export controls on missile technology. And we will talk more about this as we move along in the process. I will not take too much time. I'm pretty sure several other members would expand on the introductions in their part of their 7-minute intro, but that is all I would like to say. Actually, I'm sorry, I would like to add one more thing to this. The Missile Non-Proliferation Network also includes, MTCR is one example, but it also includes the Hague Code of Conduct, ballistic missile proliferation. I think that was formed in 2022. And then, of course, we have the United Nations Security Resolution, which is 1540, which was passed in 2004. So these, in combination with MTCR, can be considered as part of Missile Non-Proliferation Network. So we'll talk about the strengths and weaknesses later, but this is all I would like to say for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arun, for very concise and very precise introduction to MTCR. Now it's my honor and privilege to invite Commodore R. Sheshadri Vasan, based in Chennai, India, to make his opening statement. Sir, kindly unmute yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Adityanji. It's always a great pleasure to be here and interact with so many dignitaries who are here. I think Arun has made it easier for us all because he set the ball rolling by identifying what is this MTCR all about, and also has drawn our attention to many of the parallel ones which are taking place. I will try and have it as an India-specific discussion because that's of great relevance to us sitting in India. And as was also brought out, a lot of things have happened in India in the last 10 years or so. 2016 is when we got into the MTCR, 17 is when we got into the Vasanar, and 18th is when we got into the Australian group. So obviously, this is something which has added a phenomenal amount of value to India's standing in the Global Committee of Nations as a responsible nation that complies with these obligations. This is not treaties. Therefore, it's not legally binding as such. Yet, the India has shown by its commitment that it will comply with this. So let me talk about the advantages that have come our way. Now, because we took some efforts to get in there, and we see the immediate effects of the effort in the cryogenic engines from our side. That became easier. We started exporting BrahMos because the restriction of 290 kilometers, of course, applied to the exports. But on our own, we could expand the ranges to even 800,000 kilometers today. So these have been the phenomenal amount of advantages that India has enjoyed after having joined MTCR. Likewise, the joining with the other agreements that I mentioned, with this Australian group or the Vasanar, has enabled us to control the happenings in our area. We all are aware that just about 7 to 10 days ago, there was a consignment of CNC machines which were meant for Pakistan, and we were able to stop it. So obviously it shows the kind of commitment that's there, and also at another level brings out the level of cooperative arrangement that exists because of these. You might even call it informal gathering of people. But the point is, they are talking to each other. They're trying to identify what the challenges are. The exchange of information, intelligence is of such level, which enables this prosecution of the wayward nations who are there. I'm specifically referring to China, which is known violator of these. So, even now it has not joined the MTCR. It says I'll comply with everything that is there in MTCR. That's fine. So we expect nations to be responsible. But as long as India enjoys this position of advantage in terms of being efficient in ensuring that these controls are exercised in this region, as proliferation is something that's of great concern to us with our nuclear adversaries, one on the Pakistan and the other one is China. And of course, there are other issues related to North Korea. We'll not go into now. We could take it forward during the discussion time. But the reason why I focused on India's point of view is that we struggled a lot. Remember, even the nuclear supplier group, of which we are not a member, it is the 2005 and 123 agreement that allowed us to be in the big league. So, while there is an argument here to say that, even if you are not part of the NSG, you are enjoying all the benefits. So why worry too much about it, particularly if China is a big stumble block? So that's a different issue altogether and not directly related to the MTCR. But the only reason I mention is that I think somehow there is greater confidence amongst nations around the world in India's ability to be responsible, to be part of the global initiatives, whether it is a treaty, an obligation, or whether it is a more of an informal nature of agreements that has allowed us to gain from this and also contribute to global security in terms of nuclear proliferation. We also are aware, sitting in India, that a lot of this is also due to, related to sustenance of defense industries. For example, in US, they even in 2020, they went about amending some of these related to the drones. They said, as long as it flies below 800 kilometers and it has such and such ranges, we can exempt it. So obviously this was related to the sale of predators and other such variety. And, we are the beneficiary again here, because we concluded the deal with for these kind of high value assets. So by and large, from the Indian point of view, I would like to stop here and say that we gained immensely and we also contributed. It's not that it's a one-way traffic. We've been responsible and we have contributed to the focus of these obligations which are there, whether it's MTCR, whether it is Vasanar, or whether it is the Australian group. It helps us to increase our profile and also those not directly related to MTCR as far as the NSG is concerned. Our pitch has been that if we do join as a responsible nation, it will also help us to meet the climate targets. So that's another kettle of fish. So I'll touch upon this maybe in the next round of rounds, if should time be permitting. Thank you for this opportunity, Dr. Adityanji.
Thank you very much indeed, Commodore Seshadri Vasan. As usual, you always are very articulate in putting forth India's point of view. For our audience, I have two requests. One is kindly unmute yourself. Please don't do any conversation because it interrupts the flow of our esteemed panelists. I see a number of audience members have not muted themselves. Please mute yourself. Commodore Watson did make a mention about India stopping Pakistan-bound cargo. Just to sort of bring our audience to the level, in month of January, an Italian ship, CMA Attila, docked on a port in Gujarat. And there was some cargo bound for Cosmos Engineering, a company that is on entities list of Government of India for proliferation concerns. There was equipment worth 22,000 kilograms. And it was found that it is a CNC machine that can be used for dual use as well as for proliferation ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons. The cargo came from China. So this is very important. We think that the source of the machine was Italy. It was routed through China to Pakistan. And yes, it created an incident because Pakistan was up in arms, but India was just doing its MTCR obligation. So that is to bring our audience to current level. Now it's my honor and privilege to invite Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor to give his opening statement. Ambassador Kapoor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adityanji, and thank you for the clarification and the explanation of the incident which happened recently. And thank you to CSA also. for conducting these very important sessions, which are very, very useful for everybody. And I also thank my panelists, First Lieutenant Arun Ayagiri, for laying out the premise of the MTCR and discussing about the other such control regimes and treaties, and to Commodore R.S. Vasan for bringing into context the Indian focus, the Indian aspects and the benefits to countries like India. Now, the topic before us today is effectiveness of the MTCR. So I will thus have the possibility to delve directly into this aspect because we have already discussed some of the other aspects earlier. So today the MTCR is at a crossroads, and that was the title of a publication also recently by SIPRI, the Stockholm Institute for Peace Research, or whatever, SIPRI. And so it is at a crossroads. Both Russia and Ukraine are members of the MTCR. Russia and Ukraine are at war with each other. And therefore, the MTCR is almost at a standstill, except for one lone meeting which was held in 2022 in Paris. Most activities are at a standstill. The membership has not expanded since 2016 when India became a member. There's a list which is called adherents, which are the countries which agree to adhere by the guidelines of the MTCR. That list has also stagnated for a long time. There are only 3 adherents currently, and that is Estonia, Latvia, and Kazakhstan. I'll just reconfirm that. And then there are no other adherents who have sort of agreed to join in this time. So how do we now, looking at the current status of the MTCR, how do we make it active and effective again? How do we infuse life into it? How do we make it sort of sustainable? How do we make it outcome oriented again? That is a very big challenge which faces the world and the MTCR countries today. While the UN
was not just going only, because again line of treatment was not COVID, it was viral.
Viral, exactly.
और वो कौन सी थी run receive what
Yeah.
that they used to give us
Run vaccine. Which one?
Nina Manral has to mute herself. Nina
Rajiv,
Manral.
please unmute yourself. You are disturbing the panelist.
Thank you, Dr. Aditya. So we have to now see where is the MTCR today and how does it move forward into the future? How can it expand the base of its adherents? Some of the adherents who had agreed to Nima Manral.
Manral, please unmute yourself. Nima Manral, please unmute yourself. Please mute yourself. You're disturbing the panelist.
Thank you. So there were some countries like China, Cyprus, Iraq, Israel, North Macedonia, Romania, Slovakia, who had already started the process of becoming adherents to MTCR, but have not completed the process. In the sense, for completing the process, a political submission is required, political statement is required to be submitted that yes, we are now signed this political declaration and we are adherents. So adherence is also a step in process besides the UN Security Council Resolution 1540, which encourages other countries also to adhere to the principles and guidelines of the MTCR. Now, if MTCR currently is at this point in its history, where it has done a lot of useful work in the past and is still capable of doing a lot of useful work in the future, how does it take cognizance of the problems which it faces currently, including the issue of consensus? What is required for decision making in the MTCR is consensus. Now, when I was looking after SAARC in the Ministry of External Affairs in New Delhi, we had a similar problem. With Pakistan being a member of SAARC and it's sort of taking a very different viewpoint on every issue compared to India. It was very difficult for the SAARC to move ahead. So it was with very great difficulty that we managed to get them on board on many issues and started moving SAARC ahead positively for some period of time. It has again gone back to that same rut, I'm told. And how do you bypass this issue of consensus is one thing which has to be seen in depth. By qualified majority, etc. We can discuss that later as we go into details of each issue. The other important issue which faces MTCR is the advancing technologies. Now, MTCR defines what it's going to do based on what technologies at a particular point of time, what range, what missiles, etc., etc. But as we have seen even in the Ukraine-Russia war currently and in Israel-Gaza situation, that the UAVs are now capable of delivering much more lethal payloads. And the whole game has changed in the sense you can manufacture a UAV, you can manufacture a drone by using technology available on the internet. And then you can create devastating effect. So how do you now bring in new technologies? Thirdly, the transparency in the organization has also come in for a lot of discussion and challenges. How do you improve the transparency of the organization so that it becomes more sort of capable of going into the future? Fourth is the advances in social media, for example. How do you utilize the social media capabilities which are available to every organization and every individual in the world? And finally, how do you incorporate the youth, for example? Because still you are able to incorporate the youth into the entire structure of the organization and use their potential to bring in latest technologies, to bring in latest thoughts, to be ahead of the curve of technology, because technology is advancing at a very rapid pace. And all governments all over the world are facing this issue of control and regulation and management of this technology issue. So how does MTCR also cope with this issue in the future? And how do you have monitoring? How do you have evaluation? How do you have assessment of what is happening in the world in terms of violations of the protocols or guidances of the MTCR? Final point is how can India also contribute more effectively, more actively, because India has become a nation which is showing the path to the other countries in the world, as we saw in the G20 meeting recently, and in other meetings which we are seeing all over the world in the last few years. So how can India contribute more actively, more effectively to the future of the MTCR also? I'll stop here in my opening statement and delve into greater detail in these issues as we go along. Thank you, Dr. Aditya.
Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, for enlightening all of us on the international issues pertaining to MTCR. I would like to make a clarification because pretty much all three of our distinguished panelists made some mention about China. China is not a member of MTCR. China has voluntarily agreed to adhere to the MTCR consensus or protocol, so to say. But if we really dig into the history, China did apply to become a member of MTCR. China's application for MTCR was considered in year 2004. And actually, after due consideration, it was rejected. It was rejected because of China's behaviors. China's behaviors of not honoring the commitments. Its national laws were not in consonance with the objectives of the MTCR. So despite China's ostensible, superficial assurance that it will abide by the MTCR guidelines, and since all the memberships are unanimously approved in MTCR, China's membership application was rejected in 2004. China has not reapplied after that. So that is actually the factual situation about China. I will
just one more point. Yeah. Even the process of becoming an adherent to the MTCR, China has not completed the process by not submitting the political declaration as yet. So while it expressed its interest to become an adherent and adhere by the principles of the MTCR, it has not completed the process.
We will move on to the moderated questions session. Having said that, before I go there, I'm looking at our audience, and we have a very distinguished audience member, and I will take the advantage of comments from this distinguished member of the audience, and that is Professor Reshmi Kazi, who is Professor of Non-Proliferation Studies at Jamia Millia Islamia University, Nelson Mandela Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution. Professor Kazi, would you like to make any comments before we go on to question and answer session? Because this is your expertise area. Kindly unmute yourself, Professor Kazi, if you're there. Well, I guess Professor Kazi is probably not in a situation to give comments, but we can always consider later on. So I'll start with the moderated questions session before I go to questions from the audience. And my first question is to First Lieutenant Arun Ayagari. You know, in MTCR protocol, there are two annexes, Annex 1 and Annex 2, and Annex 1 suggests that completed ballistic missiles may not be exported to the countries. Now, my question is very specific. Yes, MTCR protocol allows for prior agreements to be honored. So Arun, my question is that, aren't we violating the spirit of the MTCR when US continues to export Trident advanced two missile systems to UK just because there was an agreement signed in 1961 for Polaris missile sale, and that agreement has been used to continue to sell completed missile systems from US to UK, from Polaris missiles to Trident 1 to now Trident 2. What kind of example, moral example it is setting, like First Lieutenant Arun? Please let us know.
Thank you. I'm smiling because I'm hesitant to use the word hypocrisy, which it actually is, but I'm hesitant to use that word. Which is why I'm smiling. So yes, we saw a number of both member and non-member states violate the guidelines or agreements. For example, you're talking about the CNC container before, the Chinese container, which was intercepted by the Indian authorities. In that case, China, a PRC, was in violation of Wassenaar Agreement, was in violation of MTCR Agreement, which it promised to adhere to, despite its non-membership status. So that's one example of countries violating. Number two, yes, a mere agreement amongst countries is not an excuse to violate any guidelines. In fact, this brings to light the vertical alignment, vertical, I should say, proliferation, which goes unchecked. When one state transfers a technology to another state, violating the agreement, that's a horizontal proliferation. There's also vertical proliferation, and this is a great example of that, meaning member states amongst themselves either sell or transfer technology, or a specific member state continues, which is why it's vertical proliferation, continues to explore on the technology and continues to use the technology. And another example, again, I dislike to say this, but another example of hypocrisy is the United States and PRC have not signed CTBT. They did not sign the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. When the P5 member states, or in general, the NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty member states, or the nuclear weapon states, are supposed to set an example to not just their own members, but also non-members, and they're supposed to encourage non-members. I think expressing hypocrisy is not setting a moral compass. I agree to some extent, yes. However, in other cases, for example, since you spoke about United States, in other cases, United States did go above and beyond her limitations to help India get membership, right? Despite its non-membership status in the nuclear suppliers group, and we all know that there are 48 member states, and of which 47 member states are in favor of India, and there's only one member which is not, which is the PRC. Despite that, thanks to Manmohan Singh, Dr. Manmohan Singh, and Mr. Bush, to the civil nuclear deal, and the United States made a promise because India had a clean track record when it comes to nuclear, footprint. It promised, and United States promised India to get her the membership, and it did keep her promise. So yes, there are instances where United States and other states are doing their best to help non-members gain membership. However, there's also an element of hypocrisy which cannot be ignored.
Thank
And
you.
I
You have answered the
think
question very satisfactorily in
Yeah.
great detail. I will try to invite Professor Kazi again, if she can try to unmute herself. Professor Kazi, kindly try to unmute yourself. You may be able to do so. Yes. So we are waiting for you.
Am I audible, Dr. Adyanji?
Yes, Professor Kazi, you are audible.
Good morning to everyone on the other side of the world, and good evening to people from my side of the world. Thank you very much for those kind words, Dr. Adyanji. And I must say, this is a very important and a relevant issue that the distinguished panelists have already highlighted in their initial comments. And I really look forward to their comments for the rest of the program. Just my two bits out here. I think the issue, the politics surrounding MTCR has gathered more importance in the current situation when the Russia-Ukraine crisis is still ongoing. And as the first panelist mentioned, that China and the United States have still evaded the CTBT. The de-ratification of CTBT by Russia has further made issues more complicated. As I see, the future of arms control is, it's becoming more and more bleak. And in this situation where proliferation is a concern, a very serious concern with this newest incident that has happened, MTCR is something which needs to be given much more importance. And it is an issue, I'm so glad that this issue is being highlighted today. One specific issue that keeps on bothering me, it's over the politics surrounding the membership. So India is still, has not been able to gain entry as a participating government in the NSG. And China's membership is also gathering dust, as the panelists have pointed out. If I have to look into the politics, MTCR's membership is also by consensus, unanimous consensus, I believe. So can a situation be, can it be, can we see that China's membership of the MTCR, can that be traded? If not traded, maybe that is not the right word, But India's membership in the NSG, it is being politically blocked by China. Can China's membership into MTCR, can that be seen as a ground to, for some kind of where this accommodation can be done? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Kazi, for your observations. And you are suggesting an important quid pro quo kind of arrangement. Whether that would be successful is left to the future. But as far as I remember, in NSG, besides China, there were other countries that objected to India's membership. And I can tell you who they were. It was Turkey, it was Ireland, it was, I think, Italy. So there were a group of middle-level countries with various objectives besides China that got together. Turkey was essentially inspired by Pakistan to block India's entry. So it is a much more complex process, but we shall see what happens. I will ask my next question to Komodo Watson. Komodo Watson, we have talked about all the three panelists and Professor Kazi about China's role in ballistic missile proliferation. China has not only proliferated to Pakistan, but China has proliferated to DPRK, Democratic People's Republic of Korea. It has proliferated missiles, fully assembled kits to Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, to Iran, and also some other countries. You want to make any observations about this Chinese duplicitous behavior in the areas of proliferation concerns? On one hand, it claims to be a responsible member of international community, signs agreements and then uses them as toilet paper, and never adheres to any signed agreement. Komodo Watson, please. Kindly unmute yourself. You're muted.
Okay, thank you. There's a little bit of delay in my unmuting. No, I think all the valid points have already come out from the panelists. And, specific to China, it is again been brought out to say that, whether it signs a treaty or it does not sign a treaty, it's a habitual offender. It's been seen in the case, right? You rightly brought out about Pakistan or Saudi Arabia. So, it is intentional as far as China is concerned about not joining the MTCR. I know, as Professor Rashmi brought out, would it be a bargaining handle to get China on board with MTCR? It all depends on, even after having joined the MTCR, would China still continue to be a responsible member or will continue to violate, as in the case of North Korea and Pakistan and Saudi Arabia and others. So, I think it's a difficult situation as of now. I think Ambassador Kapoor brought out about the efficacy of drones, which is increasing manifold. You've seen that many of the losses that are suffered by Russia are due to the innovative ways in which Ukraine has used these UAVs and even surface drones. So, would you really require an MTCR compliant nation when they are willing to explore other means to subdue their enemy? So this becomes an important technical question, in terms of capability, etc. Because even some of the recent attacks in the maritime domain brought out that the surface UAVs, unmanned surface vessels, were going all the way and carrying out this with small missiles. So, the entire MTCR has been made to stand on its head in terms of what is it that you are trying to control. So what are you trying to control when the entire gamut of these 290 kilometers means nothing with violators like China on one hand, and with innovations on the battlefield which are coming to forefront in the Russia-Ukraine war, and also even for that matter in the Red Sea. We've seen the Houthis, the way they have been deploying these. Whether Houthis, if at all they became a nation, if they were signatory to the MTCR, would it bind them from using these missiles that they are using on merchantmen. So I think, you have to re-examine the entire context of what was it that we aimed to achieve in MTCR. Has it achieved its objectives? I think it's again a point that was dwelt upon in length by Ambassador Kapoor on the effectiveness of MTCR. Now, when you're trying to assess the effectiveness of MTCR, first you have to realize that, there are a lot of definitions have to be rewritten. So when you start rewriting these definitions, you find that, perhaps the entire ambit of MTCR would come into question. So that's one point. As far as, again, coming back to India, because I am from India and we closely monitor what India is doing, the success of G20 or even otherwise in international relations has brought out that India continues to exercise a lot of responsibility. Now, why is it this being done? I think our external affairs minister, who has been very vocal, has been quite clear to say that, while we respect our strategic autonomy, it gives us the strength to engage with who will benefit us. Whether it's MTCR, whether it's energy, whether it's something else which is there. So I think each nation rightfully would work to ensure that its long-term national interests are protected. And therefore, China is trying to protect its national interests by not signing something and opposing India particularly. In fact, in the NSG, everybody is aware that, why make this exception to India? Allow Pakistan also inside. So there are global issues of relevance and, the regional rivalries. So all this need to be examined in full strength before we understand if something needs to be modified amongst these 35 members. And if so, how do you bring about compliance from all these nations who definitely would like to ensure that there is some kind of a global order, including the rules-based order? Another point that came out was clearly about CTBT. No, just I think last week we saw reports to say that, both US and Russia are planning to come back to the test arena. So this opens up a Pandora's box again. So I think, the entire thing is in a state of turmoil, and we need to be able to stay ahead of this by better exchanges amongst the like-minded, and that's the only way forward to ensure that all these treaties or even obligations work for the common good of mankind. Thank you.
Thank you, Commodore Watson. As the moderator, I will exercise my prerogative here to clarify certain situation. The MTCR protocol has been amended to include UAVs. So the drones of any kind are included now, and that is what First Lieutenant Arun Ayagiri had said, that the M has become oxymoron in MTCR because it is MUAV-TCR. The other point is that original MTCR protocol was about ballistic missiles that were capable, nuclear capable. Right now, the protocol has been changed to WMD capable. So you include all kinds of payloads, whether they are biological weapons, nuclear weapons, or chemical weapons, or any other kind of thing. So the protocol has been amended to keep up with the time, and UAVs are included. But I'm going to go to Ambassador Kapoor for my next question. MTCR specifically talks about, proliferation, horizontal proliferation amongst the member countries and non-member countries. We are at a situation in Red Sea about the Houthis. Should the protocol be amended to include non-state actors like Hamas and Houthis and Islamic Jihad and similar kind of non-state actors? Because in all international treaties and all international arrangements and conventions, we have not included non-state actors. Ambassador Kapoor, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adityanji. You have made a valid point in the sense that it has to include non-state actors in its very definition and its guidelines. Now, as I was discussing earlier about the effectiveness of the MTCR, some of the areas which need a lot of strengthening are the following. One is that the leadership itself. If you have bureaucrats and diplomats who are, looking after it, who move on to other jobs, from all countries, and political leadership also, which may be committed at some times and not so committed at other times. How do you sort of create or evolve a permanent cadre of officials who are dedicated to these goals? Now, if we have to move towards that, what are we lacking? We are lacking a secretariat in the first instance. MTCR does not have a permanent secretariat. So how do you create a permanent secretariat in the first instance? Whether it is in Paris, whether it is in India, whether it is anywhere else. You need a permanent secretariat to have a permanent cadre, which is based there. And then you plug in the diplomats and bureaucrats and the political leadership. And then it starts making sense to how to create mechanisms for making it more effective, for better monitoring, for better interaction, for better database. Then in this permanent secretariat, you also have to see how to bring in the technologically enabled and capable people who understand technology, who understand the future of technology. You have artificial intelligence and Gen AI, moving in leaps and bounds today. That is also going to impact this monitoring of the MTCR. You have quantum technology, you have data analytics, you have cloud, you have so many advances in all the technological fields. So MTCR being handled by non-experts in these areas does not make much sense for the future. So how do you now bring in that sort of thing by permanent staff, by fellowships, by internships, in whatever way is possible to get in that expertise? And how do you then put out your thoughts and your ideas? Because one of the complaints against the MTCR has been its lack of transparency. So how do you increase the transparency? Once you have a permanent secretariat, you start putting out things in the social media. You start publishing papers, you start publishing briefs, you start publishing notes, you start having resolutions, you focus on amendments to the guidelines, etc., etc. It starts making more sense. And then you have a proliferation of entities which are controlling on entities like MTCR. You have the Wassenaar group, you have the Australia group, you have the HCOC, which is the Hague Code of Conduct, and you have other groups like that, which have been already mentioned. So how do you bring in coordination and greater clarity amongst these organizations so that they work in a focused sort of manner?
Thank you, Ambassador Kapoor. You have amply asked the question. We don't want to have a wider discussion at this stage. So I'll go to the next question, and my next question is to First Lieutenant Arun Ayagiri. Some of our panelists and Professor Kazi did mention about the Russia-Ukraine war. And Arun, you are a retired US Air Force personnel. US is actually transferring Army Tactical Missile System, ACMS, to Ukraine. It's been budgeted and it's been transferred. Granted that the range is 190 miles, but there are longer variants also. Again, we come into this gray area and this explanation of hypocrisy. Both Russia and United States are member states of MTCR. How do we explain this Army tactical missile system transfer to Ukraine? Please.
Thank you. So I understand Dr. Adityanji is trying to put me in a fix here by asking me pointed questions related to defense, but I will not fall in the trap, number one. So I will not get into the specifics of the details of that specific instance, but I'll still overarchingly answer that question. You're right. Member states themselves are avoiding by the rules. This brings us to the limitation of the MTCR itself. While Ambassador Kapoor was talking about the other limitation of not having a permanent secretariat, I was trying to see what other limitations. I think the limitation is in the name itself. How about having having an alternative name for this as a result, alternative course of action, which is Missile Technology Control Treaty. All right, something similar to that, which makes it legally binding, because right now, since it's like I mentioned before, it's an export control regime, it's informal, so there is no power to impose sanctions or penalties on states that circumvent the regime. Well, one could argue that even if there are sanctions, some states like PRC are habitual violators of rule-based orders like UNCLOS, UNCLOS, and other protocols, despite being P5 members themselves, when they should be more responsible and accountable. So that's one thing I can think of. The other thing to avoid the situation you mentioned, Dr. Atinji, is I see there's an inherent non-linkage to the United Nations. In other words, United Nations is not holier than thou. It has its own limitations, and it is in dire need of security reforms. And I wrote a white paper in a Nepalese think tank on UN reforms. I would suggest the viewers to read that white paper. So that's no guarantee, but still, I think having a holy blessing or have United Nations sprinkle holy waters on this through some sort of association or linkage to MTCR would grant it some sort of authenticity, gravity, and seriousness. This is something I can think of, and yes, the MTCR itself is in dire need of expansion with changing times and technologies. I think there was a limitation on UAVs not exceed 800 kilometers an hour, but I think with this constant growth in technology or emerging technologies, I think we would be hard pressed to take a second look at the guidelines themselves. But
Thank you,
and the
Arun.
last,
Thank you, Arun.
thank you.
I know you have decided not to answer the question and you have gone to other aspects of the discussion. So I'll go to the next question, and that will be addressed to Commodore Watson. Commodore Watson, both First Lieutenant Arun as well as Ambassador Kapoor have talked about need to advance this export control regime into treaty status. At this point in time, the point of focus country is France. Any of the technical meetings are held and support is provided by France. And I know that you always safeguard Indian interests, and you made comment on G20 and rising profile of India. Do you think it may be appropriate on part of Government of India to offer permanent secretariat for MTCR and a future treaty in India, the headquarter to be in India, because everything is either in Austria, Vienna, or in Stockholm. So that would be a departure from this Eurocentrism of international proliferation regimes. Would it behoove Government of India to offer a permanent secretariat and permanent actually bureaucracy for an MTCR regime and maybe a future MTCR treaty to be located in India with fiscal support from Government of India?
I think it's an excellent suggestion following from what even Ambassador Kapoor suggested, because there is no formal way of handling issues that are discussed. So once you start off a secretariat, whether it's in India or wherever, and you have a permanent lot of people who are looking at the minutes, the day-to-day happenings, analyzing situations such as the one we faced last week, I think there'll be greater maturity amongst the nations to finally move on to what Arun brought out, to say that the very name needs to be changed. So this is a transition from MTCR to another treaty. That won't happen overnight. You need to work towards it. So I think from that point of view, having a secretariat makes a lot of eminent sense. But now who will build the cat is always a question that comes, and Ambassador Kapoor will definitely tell you how difficult it is to get all these minds to come together. Not that it is very difficult. It's a question of getting the minds. I think with the success of G20, a lot of faith has been reposed in India's ability to manage such huge challenges which are there. And I think it will also raise India's standing to say, well, I think we are not just talking about these 3-4 regimes which are there, which may mean a lot, but we are not able to enforce anything. From that point of view, to be able to move to that state where you are able to impose sanctions, etc., require a formal structure. I think from that point of view, I totally endorse this suggestion which initially was made by Ambassador Kapoor, and with the follow-up question that you made, I think it's a great opportunity, and you should not just restrict it to MTCR, start moving it to other ones which are there, which have similar kind of issues related to not being able to sort of punish those who violate. Not that we are in a position to violate, punish China, which is violating UNCLOS, as was brought out by Arun regularly. And so therefore, everything hinges on this so-called rule-based order. Everybody asks, what is this rule-based order? Who's made these rules? But UNCLOS is a rules that has been made for the entire maritime nations, and it's being violated. Can you take the United Nations peacekeeping force now today to South China Sea and say China behave? You can carry out FONOPS operations forever, but are you in a position to bring China to book? So, but at least there is a certain amount of formal way in which, there is a structure, there is a secretariat, there are, regular discussions which are there, and people look up to this, and the whole procedure gets refined. They will take into account the kind of developments that are taking place as because of technology or because of the changing geopolitical situation that exists. So I totally endorse this, but we need to make this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Commodore Watson. Ambassador Kapoor wants to join, but before I give the floor to Ambassador Kapoor, I just want to make one clarification. Yes, the China's violation of UNCLOS, China's flagrant, denial of the permanent tribunal's decision vis-a-vis Philippines about the Scarborough Shoals, that is very well known. And yes, there's a need to bring China to account about violating the rule-based order, about the UNCLOS. The problem is that how would you enforce UNCLOS when the superpower itself has not joined the UNCLOS? United States is not a signatory to UNCLOS. So it has no moral standing to tell China to follow the UNCLOS, because Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao will say those people who have not signed the UNCLOS should not be telling China what to do. So that's a very anomalous situation, but now I'll give the platform to Ambassador Kapoor.
Thank you, Dr. Adityanji, and thank you to Commodore Seshadri Vasan also for his comments and inputs. Regarding the possibility of India offering, the possibility of setting up the secretariat for organizations like MTCR, I just want to comment. I'm happy to be corrected also, if I'm incorrect, that for 70 odd years, we didn't have any headquarters of any international organization based out of India. There are hundreds of such entities and hundreds of such headquarters in different parts of the world, in different countries. It was only with the International Solar Alliance that the first entity was set up in India. And that also with a resolution sponsored by India and France and the United Nations. And the second global organization which has been set up thereafter is the Global Biofuels Alliance, again initiated by India. But so far, no other international entity where India is not the sponsoring or starting or pioneering partner has its headquarters based out of India. So it's time for that to change also. And I think this could be a good start with international footprint globally increasing. Thank you. Back to you, Dr. Adityanji.
Thank you, Ambassador Kapoor, for clarifying, but it is time that we have upgrading of the export control regime into a legally binding treaty, which may take sometimes a decade-long time to negotiate, because this is an important issue. But looking at what is happening in Red Sea, what is happening to international trade, I think international community will have no option but to upgrade this export control regime into an international legally binding treaty for the goods of the global commons, to maintain peace in the global commons and global trade. This is the urgent need. So if MTCR gets upgraded into a legally binding treaty, there will be need for a permanent secretariat. And I would suggest high time for India to throw the head in the ring for permanent secretariat. So I will end this question at this level. And I go back to my next question. And I'll go back to my friend Arun. And not to try to put him on the spot, but Arun, you did mention about horizontal proliferation and vertical proliferation. By and large, MTCR agreements are more focused on horizontal proliferation between member states and between member non-states. But it does not talk about vertical proliferation. Actually, the example of selling Trident missiles from US to UK is horizontal, not vertical proliferation. But for UK, it is vertical proliferation because Polaris missiles to Trident 1 to Trident 2, you are doing vertical proliferation using the means of horizontal proliferation because you don't have scientific establishment in your own country to develop your full missile systems. But that is a separate issue. The observation is that whenever there is concern expressed, it is about horizontal proliferation, not vertical proliferation. So Russia is, developing very advanced missile systems. So is the United States. But whenever the concern is expressed about maybe countries like India, that India is upgrading it as intermediate range ballistic missiles into intercontinental ballistic missiles and things like that. Any comments on that? Arun, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Again, this goes back to inherent flaws in the guidelines of the charter itself. Vertical proliferation, I think that it needs a lot of focus for two reasons. One is to satisfy the entirety of the charter or the document itself, making sure you cover all the bases. Number one. Number two is to set an example for both member states and non-member states. If you look at the membership of the MTCR itself, since it was formed from 1987, it started with 7 states. Until I think around 1998, the count was 32 member states. Since 1998, only 3 member states joined. I was about to say leak, joined the regime, which is Bulgaria, India, and I think ROK. So only 3 member states joined. So I'm not saying this is the vertical non-focus on vertical proliferation is an issue here, but we can see the declining interest of non-member states joining MTCR. So yes, there needs to be an enhanced focus on vertical on the impact and ramifications of not following the protocols mentioned in the vertical proliferation, and that needs to be expanded. It needs to be an expansive document, like I said, which sets an example. Otherwise, there will always be all these regimes are interrelated, all the treaties are interrelated. If you see, there's a lot of commonality between MTCR, the Australian group, the Wassenaar group, that they're all pretty much trying to do the same thing, but different ways. If the member states themselves not set an example, like you frequently brought up the Red Sea, the attack on Red Sea, the states surrounding these places will take advantage of the strategic choke points. It could be Bab el-Mandeb Strait, it could be Malacca Strait, it could be the Panama Canal, Cape of Good Hope. So I think by laying emphasis, in other words, looking in your own backyard first, I think that will put the founding members, could be PRC, it could be United States, it could be Russia, UK, France, on a higher moral pedestal, which also spreads seriousness across other such treaties. So the answer is yes. I think there needs to be an enhanced focus on vertical proliferation. And I don't see anything wrong in inviting China and taking China into the MTCR fold, right? If anything, it adds more accountability. Everybody's just being so dismissive of China in general. I'm not talking about this panel in general, but I see nothing wrong in inviting PRC into the regime in this case, because that only adds more accountability. Well, there's no guarantee that it will not violate the terms of the regime or the protocol, but still, it puts international and global pressure on the member states. It makes them more accountable. So yes, I mean, I think China should be encouraged to be part of MTCR. Now, will it will it use that as a bargaining chip on other things? Now, that's a different story. But I think there should be invitation or encouragement, I should say, to invite PRC into this. I don't know if I answered the question. I know I went sideways, but let me know.
Thank you, Arun, for your very sort of out-of-the-box suggestion. And my next question will spring from this suggestion to Ambassador Kapoor. One of the countries that have expressed the level of interest in joining MTCR is Pakistan. So should we be so kind-hearted to allow both China and Pakistan to join MTCR? Ambassador Kapoor. Kindly unmute yourself, sir. You are muted.
Thank you. I was, very listening in a very interested manner to what Arun had to say about China joining MTCR, and on the contrary, China being invited to join the MTCR. Now, as a diplomat who has worked for many decades on the international stage, I have different views on that. Having seen how China violates international norms and even binding treaties very flagrantly. Now you bring in a country which has a track record like that already, existing and acknowledged by the world, like we've seen in the South China Seas, East China Seas issues. What does it do to the organization? China will continue to violate the guidelines of the MTCR. There is no stopping it. It has done that already in the past. It will only encourage other entities also who are members of the MTCR to say that, look, if China can do it, why shouldn't we do it? So the whole glue which keeps the MTCR together to whatever extent it does today will become much weaker. About the question of Pakistan joining the MTCR, it's like inviting, the thief to become the policeman in your house. In your absence, it is the most ludicrous suggestion which can be made is the epicenter of terrorism in the world to become part of the MTCR. So I won't even go down that answering that question. And about China, I have very different views, as I said earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Kapoor. I have a question/comment from one of the audience member. Actually, that is my personal friend Jitendra Neja, who is sitting in Bengaluru, India. And the question is, does export controls also apply to countries who have signed treaty for trade of items of dual use between themselves? I don't want to answer it myself, so I will leave to any of the panelists to answer that question.
Would Commodore Sheshagiri like to start on that?
I think a very simple, straightforward question in the sense that I know these cases of mutual exchanges, but they are part of MTCR, not have always existed, particularly between US and other states. Look at Israel; it's not a signatory to MTCR, but it's allowed to export missiles to whoever they want it. So it's more in the spirit of the entire agreement that we are trying to function, and not, but between friends it will always happen, either clandestinely or openly. They will say, I'm supporting the
my friend Ukraine, and therefore I'm sending this whether I belong to MTCR or not. So, no, I think we have to be very realistic about our assessment of what these treaties do or they do not do. So, it's realism that overtakes, any other obligations and, drives the responses of states in such cases. And so it's very obvious, we have seen it. We've seen so many examples here, not today, but for the last 40, 50 years, we've been seeing these examples of how, those countries help each other when required. For that matter, even some of the missiles which are there, which are exported to Saudi Arabia and all that, they did not come under MTCR, but they came under some other definition. So the missiles could do it. Why worry about something else that where you would be bound by circumstances? What do you, Ambassador?
Well, thank you, Commodore Vasan. We are coming to the end of the session. There are no other questions from the audience. My heartfelt thanks to.
I would like to make one point.
Sure.
We close the session today, which is that if you are dealing with these, export control regimes, and what point I want to discuss very briefly is about getting Russia involved as a positive and active partner in this entire sort of discussion, because the Western world may have to understand this, that the more it tries to alienate Russia from the international system, the more dangers it creates for itself and for the world. And there have been many opportunities in the past which they have missed out. For example, in early 90s, I was a professor at Georgetown University, and the Soviet Union had just been broken down, and there were discussions going on about the future of Russia and future of the various countries of the Soviet Union. And the discussions even in a university like the Georgetown University School of Foreign Service was that now that we have broken up the Soviet Union, we will deal in this way with Russia, we will set this template for this social aspects, etc. So point I'm making is, if they look at it more positively and don't keep on pushing the Russian country of Russia and more into the Chinese side, it will be much better for the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Kapoor. That's a separate point. Actually, Soviet Union and the Russian Federation, the successor state, have been part of all the export control regimes as full-blooded members. It is a different issue that there is a rivalry between US and the Russian Federation, and some of the mandarins sitting in the foggy bottom would like to break down the Russian Federation also. So that is it. Totally national problem for United States. But if I may say that pretty much in all these export control regimes, former Soviet Union and its successor state, the Russian Federation, are equal partners. And there was a time when Soviet Union as well as the Russian Federation were very sincere and committed, custodians of non-proliferation activities. So I think the problem is something different. But my heartfelt thanks to my youngest participant, youngest panelist, Arun Ayagiri, a multidimensional personality who always brings actually very unique points to these discussions. Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, as I said, he is member of our International Advisory Board, and Commodore R. Sheshadri Vasan, who is also member of our International Advisory Board, for this stimulating discussion. I'm also thankful to our audience members who joined this Saturday morning. I'm also thankful to our team CSA, Mr. Rajiv Verma, Mr. Ripudaman Pachori, Chitkala Akela, who helped me organize these programs by making technical and other arrangements. Without their help, these programs would not be possible. So thanks from the bottom of my heart to all the parties concerned. It was a very stimulating discussion. It has been actually simultaneously live cast or live streamed on our YouTube platform. So some people are probably watching through that. The entire recording would be available on our YouTube channel as well as on our website. I will just make an announcement that we will have our distinguished lecture for the month of March on Saturday, March 24th. It would be Vice Admiral Dr. Sanatan Kulshrestha. He will be delivering a lecture on China-Philippines conflict, the security of Indo-Pacific. So that would be the title. So please pencil out times in your calendars. And with that, I would like to.
Dr. Adinji, just a quick clarification.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm just for the record, I'm not retired, but I'm currently a first lieutenant in the U.S. Air Force Auxiliary. So just a clarification. So thank you for making me old.
Well,
so
that's
I'm not
why
retired yet. Not yet.
corrected my characterization and said my young friend, the youngest
Okay.
panelist.
All right. Just for the record. Okay. Thank you, folks. Thank you all.
Okay. So
Thank
thank you very much again, and we hope to see everyone on March 24th, Saturday, for the distinguished lecture. Thank you very much indeed.